Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our special edition of the Zigo and Say Kundai podcast. And today we've brought again Maponga Jena, Maponga Joshua Marara. Welcome back again, say.
Greetings to all of you. Greetings to all your viewers and listeners around the world.
Yes, you don't like to be called, say, I don't know why you let it slide.
As we know, I've mentioned it once. I don't have to keep on saying it again.
I think for us it's now the sickness of the mind, but very soon we will heal. Let's talk about the Uganda Anti-LGBTQ Act, which has been signed into law by President Museveni on 29 May 2023. Of course, I've seen some well-renowned Pan-Africanists like Professor Lumumba saying that all Africans of goodwill should actually celebrate the signing of the act. But we also have some sides, maybe you could call it the right wing or the left wing, like Julius Malema. The EFF has condemned that bill. They've condemned it because they say it tramples upon the human rights of people. At the extreme of this bill, it provides that anyone who is convicted of aggravated homosexuality should be sentenced to death. Anyone who is convicted of promotion of homosexuality, 20 years in prison. If a child is found guilty of homosexuality, 3 years in prison. So for a start, what do you think about this bill?
The bill does not come from the people. It is a response to the international community giving conditions for funding and creating a conducive environment for American, European businesses, 1, 2, creating an environment for American, European tourists, and 3, insetting and instilling a Eurocentric cultural values on the Africans. And you could have seen the interview that came through Mr. Ruto, President of Kenya, categorically stating that this is not our issue. It's an external issue through the NGOs and some of the private sectors. You have also seen the interview by Honorable Emerson Mnangagwa talking to the British news reporter, where he categorically states also that we have many other issues that we are dealing with as Africans. And the 1 or 2% or 0.5% that is advocating for this, in other words, it's not a priority. But I think of the team that I've mentioned above, Museveni takes the trophy for now, in that he has not only spoken about it, but he has moved a step further to protect his own culture, to protect his own people, and he has inserted this into law. And as we all know, to make it into law is not the president who has done it. We need to put context so that we don't undermine also our legal and constitutional instruments as to how can a bill be passed as law. There is a constituency consulting that happens. There is an MP lobbying. There's a debate that has taken place for the past 2 years or 3 years in the Ugandan space. And ultimately, the people have spoken that they don't want this. And the president must not be picked up as a lamb for slaughter, that he's the one who has signed the treaty. We must go backwards and say, for this to come up as a treaty, what were the processes that were involved in the back room? So if the Ugandan people don't want homosexuality and LGBTQ as part of their society, who are the Americans and the British and the Hollanders to dictate to the Ugandans how they want to live? The Ugandans have never gone to Britain, to America, to tell them to circumcise their children or to have polygamous relationships or to conduct rituals on the death of their families or pay lobola for their children when they are getting married. So these are our cultures that we are practicing in Africa. And if one culture is allowed to practice its own culture and the other culture does not interfere, maybe we need to help each other, Zigo, to define a small word. It might be new to your ears, but I will expand it, called sovereignty. When you hear that this is a sovereign country, what it means that country that is sovereign is free. to write its own rules, to dictate how it wants to govern itself, and be truthful to the citizens within its own jurisdiction. And having said that, Uganda has every right as a sovereign country, unless the Americans and the British are telling us that Uganda is a vassal state or it's a colony that needs its democracy to be supervised by the West. But in that context, I think the Ugandan people have made their decisions. And I've seen many debates by pastors and other civil rights leaders vehemently condemning this act. So in that sense, who are we who are living in other spaces to tell another country how they must practice their democracy? I thank you.
Is it a basic human right to have a choice to sexual orientation, to have a preference? Is it a right that's a basic right that someone should have?
As a social observer myself, I'm not easily moved with small issues that are at the bottom of the food chain. Because first time it was homosexuality, which was FG. Now, then came B, then came T, then came Q, then came I, Z, the list goes on. Even now, as early as last week, with the pedophiles, now also asking to be added onto the LGBTQ, they want a P somewhere there for pedophiles, because they're saying, I'm also born naturally inclined to children. So, and I was not born, I was just born like that. So I also need to be recognized, to experience my life. And on top of that, also the other month, I saw something, they want also a B included on that, which is for bestiality. Those who want to sleep with horses and donkeys and pigs and dogs to also be included on that. So as a community observer or a custodian of cultural practices, by opening one door to one right, the question is how many branches of the same practice are coming with it, to such an extent that by the time you are done with one process, when you open one door, how much rubbish is going to come out through that same door which you cannot protect? Is it a right? Then you cannot ask that right only for homosexuality. Is it a right for heterosexuals to breed their children they want to breed them? Do they have a right of keeping their children away from homosexual people? Do they have a right of practicing what they want to practice without being challenged by the state or private or these social lobbyist groups who make them speak words such as you are homophobic? Have we ever come up with a word called heterophobic? Are they also afraid of heterosexuals? And by the way, can you show me one family where homosexuals come from? Don't they come from heterosexual? So at the end of the day, are we dealing with the real culture or it's a subculture? If you are dealing with human rights, then you need to look at it on both ways. That if the heterosexuals have a right, so the homosexuals must have a right. But the question is whose right perpetrates the societal continuity and whose right destroys the societal fiber. And as I said on my other interview with DJ Subu, I will not mix my words, by no means. If you put 100 homosexuals on one island and you put 100 heterosexuals on one island and you come back after 50 years, you will find on one island it will be full of graves. You come on the other island, it will be full of life and full of people. So as African nations, we also have a right to community preservation, continuity of life, and the preservation of that life. And no law, no external forces must exterminate our right of existence. I thank you.
Someone commented and said the idea of rejecting these so-called Western concepts or Western cultures or Western values on African is actually unfounded, because they allege that homosexuality has always been a practice amongst Africans. Of course, it might not have been to the extent that we see in Europe, but they say it's not a foreign culture, it's something that we've always had. How far true is that?
You don't make a law out of the exception of the law. You don't make a whole community to adhere to the demands of 1% and sacrifice the 99%. If it has been in existence, it has been in existence in its privacy, in its own functions, for spiritual issues and other perversions that we cannot mention, which has been happening in the back door. But for us now to convert that into law, I think we're creating a totally new societal norm altogether. So the question is not whether it has been here or not. The question is how much rights do the homosexuals have over the majority? So it comes back again to the democratic definition. If you say democracy is the majority rule by the people, for the people, what people, and the majority rules, then you stop there. So if 100 people are in a room and 99 people say no, and one person says yes, democracy says you go with majority rule. So maybe while you're sitting there, you need to define what is democracy, and can homosexuality survive in a democratic space? The answer is no, because if the majority says no, democracy says you must go with the majority. So I don't know where we get confused with this ideology, where people are beginning to, and by the way, these are educated people who one morning they're talking about democracy and freedom, and then what, and the other morning when democracy does not work for them, then they want to again to run away with the goalposts and say, no, but we have a right of, what right do you have? You don't have a right in a democratic space. The majority have a right, not the minority.
There's a statement released by President Joe Biden of the US, and Simon Mateba here, who is a journalist in the US, is reporting that the president has described the act as shameful and has threatened to cut the aid. What is the role of the aid in today's world?
Finally, he is saying the truth. Yeah? You get that? I like the last part. He's going to cut the aid. So if you want the American aid, what must you do? You must approve homosexual relationships so that you get aid. So are we saying that our cultural values are for sale? And by the way, if Comrade Biden wants to promote homosexuality, he must become homosexual himself. He must divorce his wife and go and marry another man. And he must lead by example. Then we'll know that the man is serious on homosexuality. He has his family. He's bringing up his children the way he wants to bring them up. And by what means does he say that he wants to come to Africa and dictate what we must do here? On this comment, I would say it again, and he must go home, Comrade Biden. Go home and sit down in America. You have lots of problems in California. You have lots of problems in Taiwan and in China. You have lots of cleanup to do in Hiroshima in Japan. You have Ukraine and Russia that are giving you a headache. You want to start war in Mexico. You have a problem in Cuba. You have not finished wars in Afghanistan. You're still repairing your damages in Iraq and Saudi Arabia. And for Biden to start getting involved on Uganda's moral, ethical principles of homosexuality, I think is overstretching his resources. And that aid he has been giving us, he would rather take that aid and give to the Black Americans they took as slaves in America, who badly need repatriation and to come back home and be recognized as human beings. He can't tell us of human rights in Africa when America as a country is not even respecting the African human rights who are in America itself. We still have Americans who are being killed on a daily basis. The Black Lives Matter organizations that started in America, the boy who was killed in the hands of the police, and daily human rights are being violated in America. And what arrogance can we talk about when a president of such a country now wants to peep his neck across the other house to find out what are they doing in the other house? I think Joe Biden and the American government are overstretching their resources, and they're getting too excited over issues that don't concern them at all. They must be worried about America. They must be worried about their policies in their own country and not give too much trouble to how other people want to rule themselves. Because if Africans had enough money and we also wanted to dictate how the world must be run, then the whole world over will be running on African culture. And if the Chinese would do the same, and the Indians would do the same, and by the way, the Americans must also account for the human rights of the Red Indians in their own country, whom they wiped off from the face of the American continent in total, killing everybody. And you want to come around today and tell us about human rights when the American Constitution is founded on blood, on slavery, and the extermination of other races? I think that is being rude, being narcissistic of the highest order. The American president has lost his mind. He has lost his mind, and I think he's too old. He needs to be back home with his grandchildren, looking after them, and becoming a good grandfather to his children, whom he wants to walk down the aisle in a marriage way, not in a homosexual way. So the whole thing of receiving American funding based on homosexuality principles actually shows you the morality of the Americans, that they're not interested in development. They're interested in destabilizing the African community. I thank you.
A fellow Pan-Africanist, Professor Lumumba, of course, he actually congratulated President Museveni on signing of that bill and said that all Africans of goodwill should actually celebrate the signing of this bill. But there was a particular reaction which says that anyone who applauds the killing of fellow Africans under the guise of defying Western countries is no better than a convicted murderer. Deplorable, really. What's your comment on how extreme this bill is? Because it talks about the death sentence, this sort of crime, and also talks about children who are going to be sentenced to 3 years for allegedly participating in such. Don't you think that they've gone too far?
In your own way, we can also talk about Leopold killing 20 million Africans. We can talk about Americans dropping 25 million in the Atlantic Ocean. We can talk about the 120,000 that are in Iraq that were killed by America. Were all these homosexuals? Were all these breaching the American human rights? They said it was Saddam who was causing human rights violation. But at the end of the war, of all the people they killed, how many homosexuals were there? The question is zero. This is an Arab state which actually does not tolerate this. And while you're on that, put it on record also, that America is doing business with the Arabs. America is doing business with the United Emirates. America is doing business in Dubai. America is doing business in China, where human rights are not tolerated. Have you stopped to ask yourself the question, why is America putting Uganda on sanctions and they cannot put China on sanctions? Why are they not putting UAE on sanctions? Why are they not putting other countries on sanctions, for crying out loud? Because they're the very same principle. If what you are interested in is these gay rights, then you must put all other countries that you are doing business with on the same sanctions. So we can see it's a typical bullying exercise where smaller countries that have nothing to contribute, you can threaten them with aid because you think that they need your aid. But those that are independent and strong and supernatural, it looks like American government has no problem with the entire Arab world, which is an Islamic space, where up to now homosexuals are being killed. You are still talking about Museveni, that he said he will kill. What about the countries where they are killing and they have killed? And America is quiet about them. And you want to raise a big flag around Uganda. I think we must sometimes be careful that we do not ride the popular American narrative because they have the biggest mouth and the biggest television stations, and they will always want to direct your attention as to what must you focus on. So all of us now must focus on Uganda and ooh, these are barbaric, ooh, no, this can never happen in the world, but it's happening in the world. You go to China carrying a Bible, go to Korea carrying a Bible, will you not be butchered and killed? Why would America not put those countries on human rights sanctions for violating human rights? So for me, this is not as valuable as the president of America is trying to say it, because one, they are not fair in their dealings. They are showing great partiality in terms of their function, because they pick and choose where they want these principles to apply, and in the rest of the world and to themselves, these principles don't apply. And up to now, there are some states in America, some of the states, I could do my research for you, where same-sex marriages have not yet been fully approved. As the government, yes, but in some certain states in America itself. So America must go to those states and put them on sanctions. But no, you want to run around Africa and tell everyone else how they must run their countries and governments. But we cannot be led astray by such what might I call it? Such a perverted, sort of biased, very condescending sort of behavior, where you think that you are powerful, therefore, because you are powerful politically and with guns, you have a right of telling everyone else how they should behave, how many children must they have, who they must sleep with, who they must not sleep with, which countries they must go, which countries they must not go, which countries they must be friends with, which countries they must not be friends with. And like really, it's almost, for me, it almost sounds like a very abusive partner who wants to detect even to a partner that he has divorced as to when should she have her next boyfriend. I mean, look at the sanctions in Zimbabwe. You come here and you put the whole country on sanctions, but your embassy is still here. And you are still talking to the country that you don't want to get involved with. So the question is, if you don't want me, why are you keeping the keys to my house? Just pack your bags and go and leave my space to live alone. And the Americans don't have respect. Sorry to say that. They don't have respect. And as a government, as a country, and as leadership, I think their power is gotten to their heads now, where they think that they are the world. And that song which Michael Jackson did with Quincy Jones must not be misinterpreted.
We are the world.
They were saying we are the world, in that we need to help each other.
Yes.
Not that we are the world, that when America makes a decision, the whole world must run. And when America coughs, we must all catch a cold. That's not right. They can go and sneeze until they sneeze blood. Their problems are not our problems. And right now in Africa, homosexuality is not our problem. We have poverty to deal with. We have teenage pregnancies to deal with. We have infrastructure developments. We have mining. We have the gold mafia stories to be dealing with. We have industrializations to be dealing with. Right now we have elections to be dealing with. And America has just sent 39 million to MDC or Chamisa for 39 million. Now that we know the principles of America when they give donations, one might want to find out, is this money coming to opposition parties, coming with the same requirements? And if America is true to its requirements...
Is that on record?
It's on record. They received 39 million for elections and campaigns. So if we now know the American principles, that they cannot give you money, as they are doing to Uganda, unless you adhere to homosexual behaviors. So are they giving money to opposition party so that they can campaign, so that when they are in power, then their 39 million will be translated into same-sex marriages? The answer is a big yes. You cannot take my money. At the end of the day, when I tell you how to write your constitution, you want to oppose it. So we begin to see even our opposition playing into that space where they are being given small little teasers, small little baits to start biting this money. By the time they swallow the money, they will have a hook in their stomach. That will mean that they need to fully transform the Zimbabwean constitution towards LGBT. It is therefore true, from the fact that they have received the money, that CCC and MDC are pro same-sex marriages. And for that reason, I would not be wrong to say CCC is an LGBT capital.
They will be on your case. They will be on your case.
They can come one, they can come all. I'm not afraid of any one of them. But the reason, I hope you can, you also, as my interview, as a person interviewing me, put it in context. We are dealing with the money that has been sent to Uganda, and the restrictions of money and the cutting of aid that is going to Uganda, and the conditions that the American government is putting on the Ugandan people. Let's look at that case, because Uganda is refusing to recognize same-sex marriage. America is saying it's cutting off aid. Then you look on our Zimbabwean space. The same government in America sends 39 million, is it 36 or 39 million, to Zimbabwe to help opposition to do elections and campaign. The question is, when they win the elections, what is the agenda of the 39 million?
It's a bait, maybe.
I will leave. You said that. You can put it on record also, that you said that CCC has eaten the bait.
I will hear from them on these allegations. And also,
varuma honye ine huku mukati mva. I wish we can have this conversation posthumously on another day.
Yes.
When finally we see the constitutional requirements that CCC is bringing into the government, and what is their particular response when it comes to same-sex marriages. You will come back to me and you can pick up that conversation, and I'll remind you that you remember that 39 million? Here is it now appearing on the constitution.
But what is really the obsession with homosexuality from the Western countries? Because, as you say, if I look at the interview that was done between Richard Quest Means Business with President Mnangagwa, the interview that was done with the lady from CNN with President William Ruto. It seems like homosexuality is always on top of the agenda, even if they are asking for investment. What is really the secret behind it? What is really, does it go beyond cultural values? What is it really about? What's the obsession?
I'll cut to the chase and be very blunt. Maybe in 2 or 3 points. Point number one, the white American businessmen, together with some of the black American business people, are deep into these homosexuality behaviors. So they want to make sure that whichever country they visit, they can practice their behaviors without being arrested. That's number one.
Okay.
So for Richard Quest and the rest of them, they want, when they come to Harare, they can look around for some boys that they want to sleep with, and their lifestyle must not be deemed as abnormal. Number two, it is a perversion of the highest order, where those that have wives and children but have decided to have alternative lifestyles, they now want to influence the whole world to run in the same space. It's a cultural transformation, so to speak, and it is their bias towards having this sexless environment where there's no male, there's no female, there's no boy, there's no girl, everything is just neutral, there's no husband, there's no wife, there's nothing. So if you read very carefully some of the American papers that I'm reading through these days, the whole issue even of going to schools and having unisex toilets and having teachers teach how to run and have a gay sex and what, sending your child to school who's going to be taught how to sleep with a boy being taught how to sleep with a boy, a girl being taught how to sleep with another girl. And now what is making it worse are these freedoms that are coming, where one big old man the other day woke up in America and he says, I feel like a baby, I need diapers and etc. A whole grown-up man, and says, inside I feel like I'm a baby. According to the Constitution, those rights must be respected. And in Britain the other day, another boy sued father and mother that they are not fit to be parents. A 9-10-year-old boy, you can Google that story. And the court ruled in their favor and hired a nanny for him to live in a flat by himself because the parents were not worth to be parents. And then you have children that wake up and say, I feel like I'm a girl. The girls say, wake up, I feel like I'm a boy. Honestly, if we should go around how I feel every day, how I feel it. So if I feel like I'm a dog.
I actually hate that there is now transabled, which means that someone feels like he's disabled. So he now wants to sit in a wheelchair, enjoy the privileges maybe that will come with being a disabled person. It's all about how they feel. And some, they now feel trans black. You're a white person, but you feel black.
And some feel trans white. So maybe let's look at it this way. Also, being a student of psychology, not that I'm an authority in that direction, but I've done some studies, serious, even as part of my academic preparation on psychology. They are also, I'm not saying all homosexuals and all LGBTQ have psychological issues. But as you begin to look and understand the monster that we are dealing with, there are some cases which are actually psychological cases, where, frankly speaking, you can begin to see some psychotic and psychological defects onto the mindset of people. So when you get to that level, the question is, do you make abnormality normal? When those who are now manifesting psychological defects, they want their behaviors to be standardized. What kind of a society are we going to end up having here? Because it looks like horses and dogs are going to become wives. People are going to be walking down the aisles with their cats and stuff like that, and you have nothing to say. So as Africans, are we saying we have a right to run our communities and societies the way we want to run them? The answer is yes. We also have a right as heterosexuals to preserving our own communities. So without necessarily infringing on the others.
Is it why the official in Qatar, a top official there in Qatar, when they were holding the World Cup, and there was a lot of talk concerning homosexuality and why it should be allowed at the tournament, but the official in Qatar said that it's a sickness of the mind. That's how he he looked at
Yeah,
it.
yeah, he was quite vicious on that. But again, there are various types of homosexuality. They are what I call commercial homosexuals, whom I have seen in Johannesburg, who become homosexual because because the media industry is infested with homosexual managers, production managers, and for you to get a job, you must become a girlfriend to the producer. We have seen cases where a man who has a wife in Transkei, a man who has a wife in Rustenburg, comes to these places and he needs to play girlfriend to another man so that he gets a job. But on holidays, when he goes back home, he lives a normal life. So you have commercial homosexuality. Then you have, of course, those that are born with two genitalia. That's another breed
Yeah,
altogether.
before you go,
Then you have those in terms of
there, I've actually seen in some media spaces that for you to actually become successful or to become popular in a way, you have to be orientated in some way in terms of your sexuality.
So yes, that's true. That's a fact. So then you have the group that is born with two genitalia, male and female. And many times doctors have made a mistake. They call the parents and say, we have a problem here. The child has got two instruments. What do we do? And sometimes parents, without consulting extensively, they decide which one to cut off and which one to leave. And not knowing that maybe the hormonal balance of the one that they have cut is the one that is dominant. The other one might be bigger in terms of size, but the hormones are bigger on the other. So it's a whole complicated genetic concept. So you cut one, and when the child grows up, discovers, no, I'm actually this, I'm not that. That's another section again. Then you also have those that are simply tourism. I call it homosexual tourism. Those that are homosexual today, and tomorrow they are getting married, then they have children, then they run this. That are the group that is just confusing.
They call it being fluid.
Yeah, then in big cities, they call it what do they call it? A metrosexual. You know, you're metrosexual. You run both for male and female and stuff like that. And by the way, when I was in South Africa, I was dragged to court for this same topic of LGBTQ and etc. So I'm not new on this space, but even the religious community is also compromised, because one time than often you can't find ministers who say that they believe in the Bible and yet they promote same-sex marriages also. It almost borders on mischief.
Let's just talk a little about global politics in light of homosexuality. I follow a lot of blogs in America, and the picture that we get now is that all Americans are in support of homosexuality. But there are actually some camps which talk about end wokeness, and certain they actually decry that America may lose its position as a global power in global politics because of these sort of practices. How influential are they the issue of global politics?
It's not true that all Americans are pro-homosexuality. It's not true. I have friends in America, I have relatives in America. There are lobbying groups in America who are still complaining. And if America was true to democracy, then it must also respect the rights of these minorities that are saying no to same-sex marriage. Hence, when I'm talking about democracy, I'm just saying it loosely. But if we begin to unpack that concept on its own, you may actually find that it is irrelevant. Democracy is totally irrelevant. Because in America, there are people who don't support it. But the American government will not consider their human rights as rights. They would rather go with the rights of others. And whether those others are majority or not, we don't have statistics right now that can prove that out of the 260 million or 331 million people in America, how many of them are homosexual and how many of them are heterosexual, how many of them are bisexual, and how much population is actually occupied by the LGBT community. But we are made to think at a broader spectrum that all America agrees to homosexuality, which is not true in principle and in practice.
I just want you to tell me what you think about so-called Pan-Africanists in the context of Africans, particularly maybe if we talk about the EFF, Julius Malema, and some sections who seem to support homosexuality or homosexual practices in Africa. Is Pan-Africanism defined by cultural values, or is just defined by you as a person putting blacks first in everything?
This has been my problem with EFF for the long time. that I believe in lots of their movements and their policies, their economic freedoms and etc. We only miss each other with Malema on a very small element. That is the concept that he thinks that our solutions are found in a democracy. And this democracy as it is embedded in a constitution. And the constitution which was written by the man that he does not like, Ramaphosa, which is a cut and paste of American, Australian, France, and etc., to come up with what we call a constitution. And this very same constitution we're talking about is degrading our cultural values. I would love Malema to sit down by himself as an individual. If we remove the constitution, in terms of his own principles, what will it believe in? Hence, when Pan-Africanism is constipated with a democratic ideology, then you're just moving away from a Karl Marx sort of principle, which is a white man, to a democracy, which is another white man again, and to a Roman Dutch law. So basically, you're changing masters. You're not changing the system. And what I'm advocating for is, yes, you're Pan-Africanism, but Pan-Africanism must be defined by being pro-African, not pro-American, not pro-democracy, not pro-this. Because this very pro towards democracy, this is the bag that is full of worms. That for the longest of time, we're now trying to remove these worms out of a rotten apple and say, but let's eat it. The other part is not rotten, though half of it is rotten. So Pan-Africanism, if it lacks cultural circumcision, it always ends up as a prostitute of democracy.
I like what you said, that Pan-Africanism, if it lacks cultural circumcision, it always ends in tears. That is the same statement that I heard from some conservative. I think that is what they are called in America, when they say that this system of democracy, if people, they give up their godly values or their human values, it will also end up in tears. Because of our time, we have got to leave this conversation here. Thank you so much, Jenna, for joining us.
You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. Keep up the good work and get other views also. Get other views who can come, and maybe at a later time, we can all meet together with different views and share ideas. The idea is not one idea better than the other, but people sharing information and growing up together. I thank you very much for according me an opportunity on your space.
Thank you. Enjoy your day.